Part of the journey is the end, and the Syracuse men's lacrosse team has journeyed through the loss column as it heads to the season's end. 5 straight SU losses took the Orange to outside the playoff picture, and they head into the final game of the season unranked for the first time since 1975.
Trying to find the chemistry and the communication to limit the mistakes has been difficult, and we're going to keep fighting till the end. And
a 10th loss would be a record for a program with over a century of history, but in order to avoid that with a senior day win, the Orange need to get past their biggest boogeyman. Notre Dame has won the last 4 matchups against SU, including a 22-6 shellacking earlier this season. It's Syracuse and number 7 Notre Dame on the final Cuse countdown of the season.
Welcome into the final Cuse countdown of the semester. I'm Sam Lebowitz. They're John Eads and Ian Unsworth. Ben Schulman's out in Indiana. So I get the pleasure of working with these two gentlemen. We're talking Syracuse and Notre Dame in the final men's lacrosse matchup of the season. And as was the case last week, only pride on the line for the Orange. In their first time out after they were eliminated from playoff contention, the Orange hosted number 5 Virginia. And while the Orange scored first, Cavaliers scored most, winning 21-15. UVA's 21 goals tied the most amount of goals ever allowed at the Dome. UVA set that record in a memorable 22-21 dogfight that SU won in 1997. Virginia's 5-0 run in the first put the Orange behind the 8 ball early, and they never got the game back even. A bright spot, Jacob Burtwhistle scored 5 goals for SU in his first collegiate start.
And I think when you look at this game, Syracuse played well enough to win, but you look at the box score, there's really 2 things that did the Orange in. It was the turnovers. Now you're going to get into that later on. Syracuse turned it over 17 times, and there was a big run in the third quarter, which really propelled UVA to this win. 6-1 to open things up. The score was 20-11 at one point. But they also had some good things. Jacob Falk was about 50% on faceoff wins, and UVA only had 2 extra man opportunities. So some good things for Syracuse, but also some bad things, but 2 very bad things, which really did Syracuse into this loss.
The worst part about this game was SU comes out, scores first, and then Jacob Falk wins the ensuing faceoff, runs back towards his own cage, and throws it right to Connor Schellenberger. I mean, come on.
I don't know how
what
to
are you
explain
doing?
that.
But
Yeah.
if bright spot, if you really want to talk about it, Jackson Burtwhistle. The guy scored 5 goals in his first career start for SU. He's now got 10 in his past 3 games. Gary Gate yanked Mikey Berkman in the second half against UNC and pulled Burtwhistle in, and he's been a real difference maker for Syracuse. The reason why? He's a great cutter without the ball. He can read slides very well and find those pockets of space in front of cage, and he also can create a little bit himself. He had a little behind-the-back finish as well against Virginia. That's something that Syracuse hasn't seen a lot of from Berkman. Burtwhistle adds that extra spark.
So maybe a star in the making in Burtwhistle. And while it's been an inconsistent at best season for the Orange, those stars have been the shining lights on this squad. Tucker Dordevic, Brendan Curry, they've both been exceptional. They're 1-2 in points for Syracuse, 1-2 in assists and shots taken as well. John, where would this team be without these 2 guys?
Sam, I have no idea because they have 2 of the best players in college lacrosse, and they're still well below 500. Tucker Dordevic and Brendan Curry account for 40% of this team's production, and they could play anywhere else right now. They could be a key cog in a national championship team like Maryland, like Virginia, like maybe even Notre Dame, but they're here at Syracuse, and they're leaders. The problem is nobody else steps up with them, so that's why this team really struggles.
It says a lot about these guys that they've stuck around for Syracuse through a coaching change, through the loss of talent, but they've struggled against the top competition this season. Last weekend, it was Cole Kastner putting the clamps on Dordevic. 2 goals, both of those came in the first half. And for Dordevic, his ability to play with both hands is insane. He's a right-handed midfielder playing left-handed attack. So that's something you don't see very often. These guys are able to adjust and also able to lead the team, but it just has not been good enough this season.
And it has been a special season for Brendan Curry, but it's got a chance to get even sweeter. Ian tells us how family ties are pushing Curry in the season's final game.
Sam, the old adage is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and that rings true in the Curry family. Senior Mitty Brendan and his father Todd are the only father-son duo in Syracuse history to both be three-time All-Americans. Todd grew up in Central New York, played at West Genesee High School, and as a four-year player at Syracuse, he helped the Orange to 4 straight Final Fours from 1984 to 1987. He's a member of the U.S. Lacrosse Hall of Fame. You have to think that translates to coaching. So Todd was Brendan's first rec league coach, and as soon as the young Curry was introduced to the game of lacrosse, he was part of an Orange family legacy. He went to a Simmons family barbecue at age 5, and Roy Simmons, SU's current director of operations, pulled Brendan aside, gave him an orange pin, and said, "You were meant to come to Syracuse." And so now Brendan has a chance to pass his dad on the Orange's all-time scoring list. Todd scored 93 goals in 4 seasons, 7th best in Syracuse history. And with 1 game remaining, young Curry is at 92, 1 goal to tie, 2 to put the Sun ahead. And so if Brendan Curry does pass his dad, he'll then chase a former teammate. First-line compatriot Jamie Trimboli tallied 95 career scores coming out of the box. That's 6th best in the Syracuse career record books. Back to you, Sam.
So lots at stake for the Curry family on Senior Day, and still lots to come here on Cuse Countdown. When we return, we'll take a look at the Fightin' Irish and remind you why Syracuse has reason to be scared of Notre Dame. Stay tuned. Cuse Countdown rolls on here from the CitrusTV studio. Sam Lebowitz alongside John Eads and Ian Unsworth, getting you prepared for Syracuse and Notre Dame at the Dome. Let's do so by meeting the Irish. We'll start at the head with Kevin Corrigan. He's coached the Irish since 1988. He's coached them to a .313 and .153 record. That's a winning percentage of .672. And when he started, the Irish had never made an NCAA tournament. Now since 1990, they've made 25, including the last 15 in a row. And the list of teams to do that, make the last 15 in a row, it's just them in Maryland. And John, Kevin Corrigan, synonymous with Notre Dame lacrosse.
Absolutely. He took over, like you said, at a time in 1988 where the expectation for this program was not championship level. But then in 1990, he takes them to their first ever NCAA tournament, and they've made 10 of the last 11 NCAA quarterfinals. So that success has been sustained. Only 2 losing seasons in 34 years. That is unbelievable.
How about this? So Kevin Corrigan comes to Notre Dame and he says, I was just looking for guys that came to Notre Dame and wanted to play lacrosse as an aside. Notre Dame didn't give out full lacrosse scholarships until 2001. So Kevin Corrigan is making Final Fours, having ridiculous amounts of success. He can't even offer guys full scholarships. So he's building teams by himself. He's running these excellent game plans year in, year out. He's never getting outfoxed. He never gets outsmarted. Coach Corrigan's held his own against John Desko, against John Danowski, against Joe Bresci. All of these coaches that are at the top level of college lacrosse, and he did it without money to give these guys.
And one aspect of play that has defined Corrigan's teams is the defense. Corrigan at Notre Dame, his teams are well known for having one of the most stingy defenses in the ACC. That includes some former USILA Defensive Players of the Year like John Sexton, two-timer Matt Landis, top goalies like Joey and John Kemp. Ian, how does Corrigan's program cultivate such great defensive players?
They have a knack for finding these guys under the cuff, out of the rough, defensive players that come with big bodies, come with great reputations from great lacrosse areas, and they build them up. In Notre Dame, once you have 1 or 2 guys that can go into professional lacrosse, you have sustained run of success. Jack Kilty last year, first team All-ACC, first team All-American. He's now in the PLL. How about this? The Redwoods Lacrosse Club in the PLL has 5 different defensive players, 3 long sticks, 2 close defense players, and they're all on the same team. It's sort of like an old boys club. So you see those guys having success in the pros, you want to go there as a recruit. It's just a cycle.
The past couple of years, Notre Dame has been all over the PLL draft with defensemen getting drafted. They've had some very good defensemen in the past decade. 3 different players won the Schmeisser Award, given to the nation's top defensive player between 2015 and 2018. And another way they cultivate this talent is by going to the transfer portal. They picked up Kyle Thornton from Penn a couple of years ago, and he turned into the 22nd overall pick in the PLL draft in 2020. So they recruit well. They also hit the portal well.
So pivoting to this season now, Notre Dame still synonymous with good defense. They're tops in the ACC in scoring defense and 8th best nationwide. They've allowed just 9.6 goals per game. John, how are they doing it this year?
I think they're doing it by pressure, communication, pretty much everything that Syracuse doesn't do, Notre Dame does do defensively. They lost a lot of very talented players from last year's team, but they haven't skipped a beat. And on top of that, they have Liam Enseman in goal. And what people forget about is that having a goalie that communicates well and understands the defense is very crucial for a defense. Syracuse just does not have that, but it's a very collected unit. They have very good chemistry, and they bring it each week.
The unit's headed up by Ryan Wellner, who used to coach at Navy. He held teams to under 10 goals for 4 different seasons with the midshipmen. And he also coached former SU faceoff man Danny Varello's brother Joe. So maybe that's why he can just limit that orange offense so well. But every single year, you're right, they have talent, but also their slide packages, excellent. Their one-on-ones, excellent. Their short stick D-middies last year were goal-scoring threats from top to bottom. Excellent short stick, something that really sets you apart in this lacrosse game where you play 6-on-6 and everyone's always looking for mismatches.
So now that we've chatted about the defense, let's talk about some names to watch on Sunday. Let's meet the Fighting Irish. And let's start in the midfield with Wheaton Jacoboyce. It's been a little bit of a down year for the grad student mini, but he's still absolutely a weapon for the Irish. 5th on the team in points. He's got 17 this year. Last season, his 31 points tied for 2nd best on the team behind Pat Cavanaugh. Here's the weird thing about his numbers this year. 17 points, 16 of those coming on goals. So when he's contributing, he does so by scoring. Pretty accurate shooter as well. Nearly 60% of his shots are on goal. Cavanaugh's just at 46%. For reference, in the last time out against Syracuse, it wasn't so much Jacoboyce or even Cavanaugh who owned SU, right, Ian?
It was this guy that no one had really ever heard of before. Jake Taylor. And it's a story you kind of have to tell backwards. So Taylor comes out against Syracuse in his first career start, nonetheless, scores 8 goals, a Notre Dame program record. It was a year and a day, that game, before Taylor tore his ACL in 2021. So a year and a day after that surgery, he comes back, puts up 8. He played 2 games in 2021. His first ever career goal was a BTB scored against Bellarmine, and then injured himself in practice and sat out the rest of 2021. He's from Colorado. He was the 31st ranked recruit coming out of high school, but he's had to wait behind some loaded attack rooms before.
And right now, you can't talk about lacrosse and Notre Dame without mentioning the Cavanaughs. But we know about Pat. Now there's 2 of them. John tells us why these brothers are so dangerous.
Syracuse defense has been bad and inconsistent all season. I remember you and I were talking with each other a couple of weeks ago trying to, kind of hunt down some of these problems, how this team can fix it. They haven't fixed it all year. And, oh, guess what? Notre Dame's coming up to end the season, and they have 2 players that are absolutely going to feast against Syracuse again, Chris Cavanaugh and Pat Cavanaugh. Roll the highlight film. So let's flash it back to last season, 2021, all right? Cavanaugh almost scored right there, but keep your eye on him off the restart here. 51 in blue, bottom of your screen. His defender, Mitch Wyckoff, supposed to be covering him. He's covering nobody. Pat Cavanaugh's wide open. All he needs is a little bit of space. He gets that, and he scores easily. He feasted against Syracuse last year. I mean, look, you got to at least make life a little bit difficult for Pat Cavanaugh. He's one of the most gifted scorers in the ACC. You at least got to cover the guy, all right? Make life a little bit difficult for him. But he's got a brother, Chris, who can make some plays as well, and you can't leave him open as well. So he's dodging right here. Kakemo gets screened. Brett Barlow, the short stick defensive mid, doesn't slide. All he needs is a split second to get his hands free to rip that shot past Bobby Gavin. Again, you got to make life difficult for him. You got to have defenders there and at least testing them, making them make plays to beat you. One more play. Let's flash it back to 2021. Again, it's going to be Pat Cavanaugh this time, matched up again with Mitch Wyckoff, dodging from X one-on-one. Now, Wyckoff was the best on-ball defender this team had last year. He gets a half second behind. At this point, he's essentially using his stick to stop Pat Cavanaugh, and that's just not going to work because he does that. I mean, that is unbelievable. Highlight reel play from Pat Cavanaugh. He's going to make a whole lot of those in the next matchup on Sunday against Syracuse. He's done it time and time again. I don't know what kind of adjustments Dave Petromalo and company can make. They got their hands full with the Cavanaughs this weekend.
Thanks, John. 13 combined points between the Cavanaugh brothers the last time these two teams played. That's 13 of the 22 points that Syracuse allowed in Indiana back on April 2nd. 22-6, that loss, SU's most lopsided loss since 1977, and remains the most goals allowed and least amount scored by SU this season. John, it was bad.
Oh, it was terrible, Sam. I mean, the worst offensive performance they've had pretty much all season. It's kind of funny because the plane didn't get into South Bend that day until like 1:30 a.m. the day before, and it certainly looked like it. ND went up 12-0, and Syracuse didn't score till the 5-minute mark into the second quarter, and they couldn't get anything going all day. Tucker Dornick, Brendan Curry, they combined for 3 points in that game, and if you tell me that going into a game, they're going to lose every time.
The 18 turnovers is the number that stands out to me. It was a sloppy game. Notre Dame gave it up a lot too, but for Syracuse, when Seabold turns it over 4 times, Brendan Curry turns it over 4 times, Tucker Dordovic gives it up 3 times, there's no way you can have offensive continuity when your best players are just fumbling the ball and leaving it on the turf. You need to keep the ball away from the defense, give them some time to rest, and let Dordovic do his work. We've already talked about it. He's just that good, but he needs the ball and he needs some time.
Hopefully things change for Syracuse this next time out against Notre Dame. When we roll on here on CC, Sunday's Senior Day at the Dome, that means it's time for Senior Superlatives. The most likely to hand out awards to lacrosse players, that's us. Stay tuned.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Cuse Countdown. Sam Lebowitz, John Eads, Ian Unsworth for Syracuse and Notre Dame. And this game marks Senior Day at the Dome. That means graduation's right around the corner. And even though I'm the only one of us 3 that's heading out of here in May, we all know that the best graduations have some superlatives along with them. So today on Cuse Countdown, we're handing some out. Our first category is a superlative classic. It's Class Clown. This can mean funniest player. It can mean something else. Just take it however you want, John. Who's Class Clown?
For me, I'm going Damian Moya. He is technically a redshirt junior, but he would be graduating with his senior class if he didn't take that red shirt, so I'm just going to throw that out there first. He could come back next year, but he's my class clown because, look, this guy was the heir apparent to Peter Dirth. He should have been the next guy starting at short stick defensive midi last year and then this season, but he's really been a non-factor for this team. So I hate to call him a clown, but look, you had the starting gig locked up. All you had to do was play well and take it, but he didn't do that. It's kind of funny, too. He had an offer to play football at Central Michigan coming out of high school. He probably should have done that now that he thinks about it.
He looks like a running back, and he certainly might be better off doing that. But all things considered, how can you not take Grant Murphy for Class Clown? Because his outfits are absolutely ridiculous. I mean, look at this man. He's dressed up like he's going, he's going to take his dogs along the sled in the Arctic.
Wasn't Denim Day like yesterday?
Denim Day was yesterday. Here, he's got a cowboy fit on. He is from Texas, so maybe that works. The other thing about the class clown, yes, you're goofy, you're funny, but you also don't really pay attention that much. And Grant Murphy is someone that's known to fall asleep at the wheel. Whether it's sliding, whether that's playing on the ball defense, yeah, Grant Murphy's going to get lost every once in a while, and that's what the class clown does.
Some of those photos are rough. If you looked at some photos of me when I was a freshman, I think you'd be shocked at the difference. Our next superlative is best glow up, but we're not going to take this in terms of like attractiveness. We're going to take this in terms of a most improved player. Ian, who do you got?
Well, Jacob Faulk's a pretty good looking dude. I would say that. And he's also made a ton of strides in his 4 years, actually 5 years now, with Syracuse. He only played 4 games as a freshman. A bunch of face-off guys in front of him, and then Falk had to split reps with Danny Varello for the past 3 years. He never had that #1 spot locked up. But this season, Falk has been the guy, and for good reason. He's winning 58% of all of his draws. He's taken 369 of them in a row. So he's #1, and finally, Jacob Falk glows up to the top, and he's the only positive for Syracuse at that dot.
That's fair. I'm going Owen Siebold for mine because he's a former top 20 recruit. He was a big-time get for Syracuse coming out of high school a couple years ago, but he never really got significant playing time until 2021. His first career start came against Virginia last season, thanks Chase Scanlon, and he started 17 consecutive games since that game. This season, he scored 27 goals. In his previous 4 seasons, 21 total. So definitely his best year. And he was also a team captain. So you go from a guy that was a role player in the midfield, a reserve player, to a starter, and an impact player for this team.
All right, last one. I've got a pretty good idea who's in the running for this category. Probably no future presidents or CEOs here on this roster. Certainly some guys with big things ahead. John, who on this roster is most likely to succeed?
It's got to be Brendan Curry, and not just because he's a fantastic lacrosse player, but because he brings a whole lot more to the table than just that. 3-time captain, he's a leader. He started 42 consecutive games. He's never really had an injury, so that's not much of a liability. And in fact, speaking of injuries, that UNC game, he went down in the first quarter. He came back and led this team to what should have been a win in that game. But on top of that, I mean, he's got all the tools in the book to be an offensive asset in the PLL, 3-time All-American, consistent dominator in the ACC. And then he's also a chef. They call him the Hangry Chef. He makes a really mean bacon, egg, and cheese, so he's got that going for him as well.
I'll take Brett Kennedy as most likely to succeed. And yes, I love a good bacon, egg, and cheese, but I'll take a guy who is top 5 in all of long sticks on Paul Carcaterra's PLL mock draft. Kennedy's versatile. He can play down low. He can play up top. He can play on the wing, off the face-off. He can do about everything, and once he gets out in transition, he's a threat to distribute. He can even rip a shot if he needs to. So I love Brett Kennedy's versatility, what he brings to the table in multiple areas of the lacrosse field, and so that's why I think he's a threat to be a great PLL player, because he can impact the game at multiple levels.
All right, one more superlative for you. Most likely to finish off the show after the break? You guessed it, it's us. A season retrospective, some predictions for the final game when we come back on CC. Drawing the final Cuse countdown of the semester to a close, it's Sam Lebowitz, John Eads, and Ian Unsworth preparing you for the Orange as they get ready to host the Irish on Senior Sunday. And before we ship off to the Dome, This is the final time that Syracuse men's lacrosse will take to the turf in 2022, and the first season under new head coach Gary Gait has been anything but pretty. SU will finish under 500 for the first time since 2007, and in a year in which the Orange saw 10 ranked teams in 14 games, John, this beaten down Orange squad really never had a chance.
I would say they had a chance and they were competitive at times this season, but you just said it, Sam. We got to think in retrospect about how difficult this season was in a rebuilding year. You face 10 ranked teams, and I know you're going to face a lot of ranked teams to begin with because it's the ACC, and you probably have some good non-con opponents year after year. But let's look back at some of the close games this year. So you think about Army, they were up 13-12 going into the fourth quarter. They lost that one, lost to Hopkins 10-7. They hit 8 posts in that game, lost to UAlbany in what was an absolute monsoon, and then more recently, an overtime loss to Cornell when they were winning by 5 at the half, and then a game against UNC where they were leading with 2 minutes to go and they blew it. So, they're 4-9 right now. I could see them being 9-4, maybe 7-7 if the ball bounces better.
One stat that describes the Orange season, they've been in 6 one-goal games in the fourth quarter, and they've lost all 6. So the close ones have not gone Syracuse's way. The other thing, the injuries as well.
Yeah.
In the midfield, players have missed over 25 combined games between first and second liners on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. Really hard to build continuity with new coaches on both sides when you're missing all those experienced players.
So it is senior day, which means there's seniors heading out the door, which means there's shoes to fill between Brendan Curry and Brett Kennedy. Ian, who is Syracuse going to have a tougher time replacing?
I know I said Kennedy was most likely to succeed, but I'm picking Brendan Curry because you don't have that guy on the midfield just yet. It might have to be a recruit coming in. It might have to be Tucker Dordevic bumping back to the midfield.
Yeah.
But right now, there's no number one option on the midfield next year.
I'm with you with Curry. He scored 49 points this season. The rest of the midfield unit had 54, and that includes 8 or 9 guys. So he's going to be tough to replace. But then you got Brett Kennedy, the one guy who was, along with Nick Kamo, maybe the only good defender on this Syracuse defense. They got a lot of guys to replace back there.
But there's plenty of talent coming back next season, guys. Tucker Dordevic is among them. Owen Hiltz, Nick Kamo coming too. John, maybe outside of Dordevic, because that's probably the obvious one, who's the biggest returner for SU?
I think maybe Jackson Burtwhistle recently. You mentioned guys like Nick Kamo, but Jackson Burtwhistle just led this Syracuse team with 5 goals in his first start at attack. And why that's important is because now you can slide Tucker Dordevic back to midfield, and then your attack is looking like Jackson Burtwhistle, Joey Spallina, the 5-star recruit who's coming in, and then Owen Hiltz, and now you have some options. Now you have some versatility, and now you can fill the shoes of Brendan Curry at midfield.
I'll highlight 2 guys on the defensive end. Nick Kamo is a cause turnover machine, and he's the only remaining long pole you have. And then Brandon Aviles, the short stick, he's been really tough late, playing some very tough opponents, and also he's gotten active on the offensive end, scoring 2 goals down the latter half of this season. So having a two-way threat like Aviles to maybe step into Peter Dirt's role from 2021, that will be huge for the Orange going forward.
They also bring back their goalies, Bobby Gavin, Harrison Thompson. Now, neither of those guys are exactly key returners, but you still have those options there. You can go to the portal if you need a goalie, but you do have options at least.
What's the phrase? What's the phrase? Tell me. If you have 2 goalies, you don't have a goalie at all. It's not looking that good for Syracuse.
All right, guys, let's finish things out here. Predictions. Ian, at the end of 60 minutes, who do you got?
I have Notre Dame 20-9. I don't think it's going to be that close. Maybe Syracuse can throw a couple punches in the first or second quarter, but the Fighting Irish are just too good offensively with too many threats for SU's defense to shut them down for 4 quarters.
I have the Golden Domers 17-10. I don't think Jake Taylor scores 8 goals again because that was just ridiculous. You look back at the film from that game, and I don't even know what sport they were playing, but it was not lacrosse. I think the defense will play a little bit better. Syracuse always plays better inside the dome, so I think they'll have that energy, they'll have that fight. It's senior day. It's the last home game of the season, so I think they'll be ready to go. And Sam, before we give it to you for your prediction, we just want to thank you real quick. We appreciate you hopping on the show. We know Ben was out in Indiana, and congrats on a great career at CitrusTV.
Thank you, guys. I've got 19-13 Notre Dame. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. It's been an honor with my last CC with you guys, and I want to thank Colin Bach, Ryan Nelson, Matt Bonaparte, the EPs I've worked under. CC's been my home in the sports department for 2 years. I'm going to miss this show dearly. I hope you guys enjoyed your time with us. It's a noon start time on Sunday. OPP is at 4. That's the last CitrusTV sports show of the semester on Sunday. For John Eads and Ian Unsworth, I've been Sam Lebowitz. Enjoy the game.